Okay. Hey, did you know that in 2023, there were over 4.5 million podcasts globally? That's a huge number. Did you know that nearly 70 million episodes had been produced all the way back in 2023? We're already a full year nearly beyond that, and the numbers continue to grow. And I think that's an important statistic for us to keep in mind as you get your notebook, because we're going to talk about podcasting tonight, but perhaps not in the way that you might expect. We're going to talk about Google's Notebook LM. We're going to dive in. We're going to talk about the deep dive feature that's a part of the Google Notebook LM application and talk about one of the updates that Google dropped this week because there's more story to tell. Listen, I want to thank you for being here to watch the show, the live broadcast. I'm Daniel Lemire, and this is AI Mistakes. We got some great content to talk about, and I get to show you in detail Notebook LM and what it looks like to put something together. It's going to be a great time, and we're going to use the newsletter to put the story together. So if you're not already connected to the newsletter, head on over to newsletter.ai-mistakes.com or just drop by the website in general, because when I built my Notebook LM conversation not that long ago, I found it so interesting. I put it on the front part of the webpage. It's really kind of an interesting experience. So bring your questions. Let's get started. So, what is this Notebook LM thing anyway? Well, Google created a really interesting experience leveraging their generative AI technology that lets you really get into the content that matters most to you. Originally built out for you to be able to study, to learn new things using the power of generative AI to ask questions and really dig into a set of content. And this is really derived from the fundamental capability of retrieval augmented generation, where you can ask questions and interrogate your document so that you can become an expert on whatever content it is that matters most to you, regardless of how complex that information is. And the cool thing here is that Google is able to turn itself into an expert on your content and do it in a secure fashion. And they've continually upgraded the experience. Now it uses Gemini's 1.5 multimodal capabilities. And they're continuing to iterate the feature set that's available on the platform. And the most recent of those is this new audio overview feature. So Google did a really incredible thing with this feature set. And this has been very popular. In fact, it's even made a splash on mainstream news, if you can believe that. But what's great about this feature is that you can actually listen to your documents, those things that matter most to you, and it's going to create a podcast for you to listen to using those documents. Now, what it does in order to enable this conversation is you drop your documents in there. Limitations apply, but the numbers are growing. But basically, with a single click, you're able to create an audio podcast of your documents. And when you click on it, it does take a bit of time to put it together, but you're going to get two AI generated hosts that are going to talk about that content. And they've got some nice banter that goes back and forth. I mean, it really takes me back to the days of listening to FM radio and the DJs talking about the news on the morning show. It's a pretty crafty setup, and I found it to be really enjoyable for the content that I dropped in there. What's great about this is that it's not just taking those documents and reading them to you. That would probably be pretty boring. But it's being a lot more dynamic. It's summarizing that content, it's making connections between them, and even pulling in those relevant anecdotes, describing things sometimes in even a bit more detail. At least that was the experience that I got, pulling that information out of the files that I gave it. And what I gave to it was my entire catalog of the AI Mistakes newsletter. And I found it to be really interesting. Obviously, since I write the newsletter, I know every bit of content that's in there, and there was some kind of interesting discovery. So I'll share that with you as we go through the program tonight. But basically, what's interesting here is that Google released this all the way back in December of 2023, and they have continually upgraded its functionality. I mean, you can go through here and see how they've been making constant upgrades and changes to it. But what they dropped this week was the opportunity to guide the conversation. See, the downside of the deep dive conversation was that it was kind of very formulaic. You didn't have any control over the angle that that conversation took. You basically gave it the document and off it went. Of course, if you've worked with any of these tools for any period of time, summarization is an incredibly powerful feature. And I don't want to undersell the value of being able to summarize and pull really valuable details out of a very long document. But there are some disadvantages to that summarization. And that is that if the system decides it's not important detail, you may not hear about it at all. And so that is an important element here. You're actually giving you some control back to say, no, this is the thing that I want to focus on. And it actually works. The other feature they've added is being able to listen to that content in the background while you're working on the notebook. And of course, I use that while putting the story together to share with you tonight as I'm building things. But I'm really excited by this. But like all things, not everything is great. So we're going to get into the demo and you're going to get a chance to see exactly what this looks like. But before I jump into the demo, I want to call out a couple of really important factors here. I mean, look, the question I'm asking in the title for the video is the future of podcasting. Like, what does this mean? Because ultimately, the things that we care about are the things that we pay attention to. Sometimes we just care about entertainment and we want someone else to give us a story. But oftentimes there is more things that we need to learn that we have time for. And being able to create a curated experience that's pretty good about the thing that matters most to you right now is pretty impactful. So as I'm going through the demo, think about what this might mean to the podcasting world in general. What is it going to do wide stream for each of us? I mean, if you're creating your own podcast for yourself, what does that mean for guys like me that are creating YouTube videos? Are you going to listen to your own content instead of watching the YouTube channel? That could be an outcome. I mean, I'm a big fan of Audible, and I got hooked on Audible like a decade ago because I was listening to Leo Laporte on Twit, and Audible was an advertiser. And so now I listen to Audible. I haven't listened to Leo Laporte in quite a long time, and he's still making podcasts. So there are trade-offs to be made, but think about what this might mean for you and the world in terms of education and authenticity. I mean, do we want AI to be doing all of our entertainment? Probably not. And then, I get inspired by these conversations. I'm frequently surprised by the details that AI pulls out to listen to. And I think it's very interesting. So think about that and how things might be disrupted going forward with these feature sets. Getting some great engagement from you all on the live conversation. Keep those questions coming. I think there are some interesting dimensions to this. When we talk about summarization, being able to get a summary that's a little bit more engaging, I do think makes a big difference. I would put this as a class above summarization. It is using that as a part of the conversation. And you'll get to see that a little bit as I get into the demonstration. So just jumping right into NotebookLM, and I'm going to play with the Zoom a little bit so you can see things. You can see that I've been playing with it. I left the example notebooks there because it's fun to go back and look at those. And we can even use that to kind of get into this experience. What they've provided here is a demonstration of a collection of notes that you can begin to talk with. There are some written notes put in there, and then you can pull up the guide, and it gives you some help on, hey, here are some ways that you can interact with this. And speaking of summarization, the very first thing it does is provide a summary of what's in the workspace. So you can quickly get right in to the content that is in this section. What I like about this is they give you some handy buttons to create some other subsequent materials. This is where Notebook LM really got its start. I think the core idea here was to help people get into the things that matter most. Right here, you have the audio overview, and I could create one right now with this introductory notebook. I'm going to skip over that. But fundamentally, they have some questions to get you started, and you can just start typing your question and interrogate details. If you're trying to learn about a technology topic, for instance, dropping some eBooks or some PDFs, I mean, I do a lot of research paper reading about AI. This is a really great way to explore some of that. And I've played with that a little bit here and there, but let's dive into the newsletter because I found this to be really a great way to go back over what I've put in the newsletter. And you see here along the sources side, I was able to choose those newsletter PDFs and I just pulled them straight out of my archive, dropped them right in. Now, if you've not seen the newsletter, let me just pop that up on the screen for you real quick, just so you can get an idea of what that looks like. The most recent one, a little over a month ago, really was talking about some things that were happening from a literature perspective. My kids going to school. There's a lot of talk about AI and how it's affecting academia. And I wanted to put some thoughts out there. I generally put an image at the very front just to kind of head things out. And then it's pretty much all text and links. We may have an image or two here and there, but it's pretty straightforward content. It's almost all contextual. So the fact that Notebook LM is multimodal is valuable, but for the example that I'm going to be showing you right now, that's not super relevant because it's almost entirely textual content and links that are giving the details to Notebook LM to consume. But then you can ask questions against those documents and have a conversation. So what I like about this is that you can jump right in and understand details about the document by asking a question. What's the most impactful development in AI so far based on these documents? Just really straightforward. It's just like having a chat conversation, right? They make it really easy to use. And of course, it's using Gemini, and Gemini is a very mature model. 1.5 is doing very well. What I like about this experience is that it is giving you direct links to all of the sources and it doesn't hold back on the sources. You can jump right in, and when you click those, it brings up the highlights from your documents. So this is a really useful way to study materials. If you're trying to get your head around some concepts, it's really easy to use. And then, of course, in the notebook guide, we have the deep dive conversation that I generated. Now, when I did this, full disclosure, right? I dropped the newsletter items into the notebook and I just hit audio overview. I did nothing else. I didn't have a conversation with the documents. I just went right into it to get it started. And what it came out with was really impressive. Quite honestly, a really engaging conversation. And you know what I was really surprised about, oddly enough, was they got my name right. Like, that was pretty impressive. There is no pronunciation of my name anywhere in the newsletter content that I gave it. I'm not even sure how it knows to pronounce my name. It's very I was stunned. I just because it just doesn't happen. So what's really amazing about this is the accuracy of the model, how easy it is to consume. It creates a file you can download. So yeah, if you want to do other things, I mean, you can just pull it off the web page on a mobile device, or you can download the WAV file. Obviously, if you care about file size, you'll have to do your own work to convert it to an MP3. But it's great because you can take it with you wherever you go. You're going for a workout, you need to get into some textbook materials, or maybe you've got a test coming up in college, or is the case is with me, like I just there's not enough hours in the day to do everything. So being able to drop a big study into Notebook LM and have it produce that for me to focus on that is really a great feature. So I'm having a great time with this. And it got 10 minutes out of the PDFs that I dropped in for it to discuss. Now, feel free to drop by the website. You can listen to the whole deep dive conversation. And I would definitely recommend that. If you haven't read the newsletter so far, there's some valuable content. You can go back in there and look through that. But, in 10 minutes, you can get caught up on a lot of the things that I've been saying and talking about in the world of AI. And it's actually a really engaging conversation. I mean, the personalities that they built for the deep dive conversation are really pretty engaging. And I think, what they have done so far is a really great demonstration of the kinds of experiences that we are headed for. And I think largely it's a very good story because, look, we've all met those teachers, those professors, those colleagues. They speak in monotone. They don't know how to make things interesting or exciting. And this really solves that problem. So it really is a great thing to do. So, what does it look like to actually do this? Because I want you to see it. So let's jump back at it. I'm just going to make a brand new notebook so you can see what this looks like. And it just gives you the file picker so we can jump right in here. And I'm going to go straight to my newsletter content. And in my newsletter content, I've got my archive and I can grab all of those documents all at once because they've increased the number of files you can pull in. I just select them and it brings it right into the interface. What's cool is that if you have quite a few files, you can actually come in here and check them off. So you can actually modify the content over time and change it. Maybe you need to focus on one document more than another, and you can pull up the audio deep dive conversation and you can generate. Now, you can also customize it. And basically, what that customization feature does is allow you to call out exactly what it is that you want to do. And by being able to modify that, if there's a particular dimension you want to focus on, it makes it really easy. So, what I did right after this feature was announced is I modified the customization against the AI mistakes newsletter. And so instead of just letting it generate it, I said I wanted to focus on AI mistakes. And I'm not going to click the button and have it generate another conversation. It does take a few minutes to do that. It's not instantaneous. But you know what? It's worth the wait, quite honestly. And in the case of the modification that I made to it, basically I asked it to focus on mistakes and where mistakes matter the most. And you can then download the conversation. I downloaded it. It's still there. This was a little bit shorter conversation based on the modification that I gave it, but it absolutely did modify it. It picked up totally different elements of the conversation. And it's got a bit in here about Microsoft Clippy. It was something I pulled out in the newsletter, and they really pulled out the fun details in what I was sharing. So it does work, and it's very effective. And then, of course, they have the built-in feedback mechanism. So if you're not getting the results that you want, it is very easy to provide that feedback. The downside here, of course, is that once you've done that audio generation, you kind of have to start over. I couldn't figure out how to reset this to make a new one, and that may be something that they're going to adapt over time. I don't want to lose it once it's created because it's kind of neat. It's just a fun thing to experiment with. So I'm actually going to take this modified version and also I'm going to put that on the homepage of the website so you can get a chance to see what it looks like, give you some context of how you can kind of steer the conversation. Now, one of the great questions I'm getting as I'm talking here is, what kind of information does it get from your source versus information from the internet? And that's what's really interesting about the conversation, because I felt like having written the details, like the Clippy conversation, man, I'm pretty sure I didn't put all of that stuff in there. So I know the model is pulling extraneous details to lend additional context when when the speakers are going back and forth. They're leveraging the content you give them, but they'll give you like a quick intro. So if the detail isn't there and you're not familiar with it, I think it's going to pull in those details. But it really did stick to what I gave it a great deal. So I think there is always potential for hallucination to materialize in these conversations. But the reality is, if you're using this the right way, you're going to look at the source document to some degree, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but for me, I'm a heavy visual learner, but I also like to listen to things. I'm a big audiobook fan because I get a lot of content while I'm out and about and roaming around. So I'm able to absorb it a lot. But it seems like increasingly I'm pulling up the document at a later date and looking at it, or there's something I want to highlight or pull out of it. So it is a cyclical activity for me, especially for the things that I want to learn. So I'm not terribly concerned about the hallucination angle simply because for the most part, the details that I'm not taking a quiz. I'm doing this stuff to learn it. And oftentimes there's a little bit of looseness in being able to find those answers. But I do think, that is one of the things we have to talk about from an AI mistakes perspective. Being able to engage in this content and pick it up in new ways is really valuable, but it's not without the risk, right? You have to be willing to have that flexibility. But the other thing that really struck me having gone through all of this is that there's no way that it can cover all of the detail. It makes a really engaging conversation, but it doesn't cover all the details. And that's the reality of an engaging conversation. Because the truth is, even with the pride that I have in producing the newsletter, not everything I put in the newsletter is going to be terribly interesting. In fact, that's part of the value of a newsletter, right? You pick this up, maybe you care about my thoughts, maybe you don't. Maybe the headlines are something you're not interested at all. You just skip over the section. And in fact, that's exactly what the hosts of the audio experience did. They didn't cover news. They didn't even talk about it. They talked about my perspective a lot. They talked about the things in mistakes that I cover. And I really enjoyed that. That's the thing that I most care about in writing the newsletter is having that conversation with you all, sharing my thoughts and my views, and really helping all of us to have a really healthy attitude about looking forward to the possibilities. Because, look, we get overwhelmed with the negativity, quite honestly. So that's one of the advantages here. Like, I don't feel like I'm beat down having listened to the conversation. I come out of it feeling like I'm more educated. I picked up something interesting and I got to learn a little bit about it at the same time. But if you have a very complex document that's got lots of details in it, like if you're loading your textbook in for a 10-minute deep dive, that's not going to work. You're not going to get enough detail. They're going to cover a part of it, and having some control over which part of it now is going to be the key feature. I think this is a real differentiator. And it also means that you can take the same content and focus on different parts of it at different time. I could see that there are probably going to be creators that take their content and load it into deep dive and actually create a podcast with this content. In fact, that's actually something I'm considering doing. I kind of wonder what it would look like if maybe I did just a trial. Like, I could jump in and banter with the hosts and add my commentary to it. But is that interesting to you? Like, do you want to listen to a real person carry on a conversation with AI? Do you think it's more engaging with just AI? Or is it better for me to do a one-on-one conversation here by my lonesome, because that's engaging enough as well? I have some concerns. The good news is that people will be able to create content in ways that they never imagined to really make something useful, right? But the longevity of that, like, I already feel a little bit like this format is tired because I've created a few of these now and downloaded them to pick up some content, and I don't know. And I think, you could add some levers and maybe change the personalities out. I mean, there's a lot of things that Google could do with this to keep it interesting. But, you know, I think there's limited mileage here. But you could also kind of project out into the future to, being able to create a co host personality for your program. I think that there are elements of having a one-person conversation that really are limited. And when I listened to my newsletter in this format, it actually gave me some ideas of some other things that I need to think about. Like I was seeing my content in a new way as a result of being able to put it into the machine. So there's definitely a lot of value here. I think if you are on the go, this is a really valuable thing to be able to take advantage of, even if you're not able to consume the entirety of the thing that you're interested in. Just being able to click a few buttons and it comes out of the machine built for you, and it's a curated conversation that's actually interesting. I think that's pretty great. And I think that's interesting. And I really have to give Google a lot of credit here. To be totally honest with you, over the time that I have had the channel, the majority of the things that I have talked about in relation to Google haven't been that great. But Google does deserve the credit for coming up with the fundamental ideas behind all of the generative AI technology that we come, the transformer model that I talked about in one of the very early episodes of the newsletter. They came up with that. We would not have the transformer model that backs all of this up were it not for Google. Now, to be clear, OpenAI really made it popular with the Chat GPT. And even they were like, nah, this is probably not going to be a big thing, but we're going to do it anyway. But this is a real transformative experience. I think this is something very unique that Google has brought to the table. And I think that it is an engaging experience that has a significant future going forward and really is valuable. I wouldn't be surprised to see this kind of capability replicated in a lot of different ways. In fact, honestly, we've already seen that. There is a GitHub project that really very much mimics the capability of NotebookLM to create a podcast. I'll link the GitHub repo in the description if that's something that you're interested in. So you don't have to use NotebookLM, but honestly, it's such a great experience. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. To be clear, I don't actually know if you can get to this without having a Gemini subscription, because I have a Gemini subscription. I'm using it for my Gmail and my calendar and all that other stuff. So it's something that I'm using anyway, so I don't have any trouble accessing. I'm pretty sure this is free, though. If you just go to notebooklm.google.com, you can pull it up and start playing with it. They probably at least give you one to work with. And it does plug into Google Drive. So if you've got all of your documents and the information you want to learn about in here, it's already connected. Like they make it really easy to leverage the entire capability here. So really cool. And let me just play this in the background while we do a couple of things here. See, again, I don't know how did it get my name right? I don't know. That's pretty amazing. I think that's very cool, and it's exciting for me to have that come through. What's interesting is, oh, okay, you're not hearing anything. Let me see if I can change my settings here. Maybe I missed a screen share button. If it's not coming through, that would explain. I'll just share the screen here again and make sure that the audio is checked off. Also share the audio. Pardon the man behind the curtain here. I just have to look around my light so I can see my buttons. It's part of doing a live show. You never know quite what you're going to get sometimes. I didn't realize, you guys, that it wasn't playing it before. So let me back that up. You can actually get to hear it say my name. It's really impressive.
Okay, so we're diving into AI mistakes today, something we've been getting a ton of questions about from you all.
Yeah, especially with generative AI exploding, it seems like everyone's a little
Concern.
yeah, concerned, maybe a little curious too.
Definitely a lot to unpack there, and we've been going deep on this whole concept with Daniel Lemire's AI Mistakes newsletter.
And you know what's interesting about Lemire's take? He doesn't frame these AI errors as like these big scary
It's
things.
not like doom and gloom, the robots are taking over kind of thing.
No, not at all. It's actually quite the opposite. He sees AI mistakes as opportunities.
To learn and grow from.
Exactly.
So again, it's fun to listen to once. I think That's kind of the general sentiment I'm seeing in the comments too, right? Like, this might be interesting, but you're not going to listen to it again and again. Now, I can tell you that having listened to a substantial amount of AI audio, there are tells in the way that the generation is done. You can detect that it's AI generated, but it doesn't matter. Like, I'm sure that there will be people that will try to create an experience that's undetectable. The mimicry, the amount of sampling you need to actually copy someone's voice is very limited, and of course, that's the risk I run of being right here with you all. Uh, my voice is out there, right? My appearance is out there. In fact, it's probably not going to be too long where you could take any YouTube channel in the universe and create an AI agent or a replicant to represent that person. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some YouTube people out there that are paying the more advanced companies to create an avatar of them, and they're just feeding in some content, and they're actually running a YouTube channel that is entirely AI generated. Just to be clear with you all, on the YouTube channel, I don't have any intent of doing that. I think actually part of the fun is the authenticity of this experience, getting in front of the camera, having the conversation. That is part of the fun. And I'm always disappointed with AI generated content. Why is that? Because there's some bias involved. Like, when I go and I'm working on writing and I give it to the AI to write it, when I get it back, I might use some of the things that it came up with, but by and large, I'm kind of disappointed with it. Now, to the conversation I think we need to have about exactly this is, what does it mean for our future? Because it's actually really good. When you think about the quality of the the capabilities of these models, I think it is relevant. We're going to have the conversation. When it gets to be better at doing these kinds of things than we are, what are you going to choose? Because if you can get a better answer somewhere else, it's probably not the information that you're there for. I'd like to think that there are elements of personality that are involved. Now, I don't have a hugely popular channel. I do enjoy doing this. I enjoy the engagement that we get, and I think things are interesting. A few people have liked the work that I've done. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, and I'm here to iterate every week or nearly every week so that I can get better at it. But when you think about what's possible, you know, when I know what's AI and what I'm writing, I'm going to pick the human source because there's a little bit of bias there. Even though I know it's possible for the AI to be better, you know, there is this thing going on with me where I'm reading more and more content and I'm like, man, that's AI generated, because I'm used to seeing some of the things. And many of us do think, oh, I know if it's AI generated, I'll know. But the truth is, it's getting harder to tell. Like, because I've been focused on this for the last couple of years, it's probably much easier for me to see when something is AI generated. Sometimes I can hear it. One of the better audio models that's out there, and I have a subscription to many of them. I had a colleague actually send me some text that was generated using his voice, and I was really impressed with the quality of it. So impressed that I bought a subscription myself. But the thing was, it was like, okay, that sounds like my friend, but there's something wrong with it. Like, there's that uncanny valley feeling to it. And you're just like, okay, I know something's not right here. I can't quite put my finger on it, but you kind of overlook some of that. And that's what I mean by this rule of AI mistakes. Like, don't let the fact that it's not perfect prevent you from getting value out of it. There are lots of ways that we can leverage the content to think about things. For me, being able to solve that white page, that writer's block problem of, I know I want to talk about this thing, but I'm not even sure where to start. A lot of the social media posts that I write, I have an idea of what I want to do, and I put that into the model, and I say, okay, what are some ways that I could think about this? And, good news, bad news is, a lot of times I'll give something to ChatGPT or to Claude, and it's got like a dozen different ways that you can look at the thing. I don't want to write a LinkedIn post about a thing and cover a dozen different details. Like, that's too much. So I'll pick one and then I'll talk about that because I think that's more interesting. And we like to break things down. That's how we understand things. And sometimes it just tries to tackle everything in the moment. And this is one of the areas that we have to really be careful about as we're doing this going forward. Because if you give it too much, your results are actually really bad. The best way to leverage these capabilities is to help it narrow down into something and do really well at it. In the conversation from a few weeks ago about AI agents, and we're not even close to done with AI agents, and I'll tell you, I really believe the secret is to be very narrowly focused on a task and do it really well. And what a lot of people are trying to do, and well, I did it with the newsletter, right? I took all of the newsletter documents and I loaded it into NotebookLM. It's easy to add a lot in there, but it can't possibly give you the detail or all of the information that's in there. So keep that in mind as you're using this. It may be better that they had limitations on it early on where you could only do up to 6 documents because you had to sort of narrow down and focus on only a couple of things. And in our fast-paced society, we want to consume it all. We want to know it all as fast as we possibly can. And sometimes that's not the best thing to do. If you can focus in on those details and capture those, that's often the thing that people overlook. In studying a lot of technology over my career, one of the things that I've learned is if you're able to find a couple of books on a topic and get through it and understand everything that's in those couple of books, you really are an expert because you've gone into the details and understood the topic. Now, you have to couple that with practice. And that's where I want to close the conversation off with a conversation about mistakes. From the mistakes framework, and if you haven't seen this, please go check out the website. Hit me up on LinkedIn. There's a whole bunch of details. I built this really cool thing called the mistakes framework to really help people understand and leverage all of the cool things that are around us to make things happen because it's not enough to learn about it. You have to do something with it. And the mistakes framework has a whole series of steps. I'm not going to cover it in great detail tonight, but look, the essence of this is it is a framework that gets you started on a thing, gets you working on a thing, and gets you producing a thing. The first couple of steps in the mistake frameworks, map is the first. Understand that greater ecosystem and investigate. Dive deep into it. And that's what this Notebook LM capability does for you. It helps you get an understanding of the big picture and the small picture because you need both to be successful. But it's not enough to have learned about it. Next, you have to dive in and actually start working with it. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity for how we can use AI to actually get started doing things, but it's not Notebook LM. And it depends on what you're working with. But, I got really excited about Claude Artifacts a couple of months ago because you're able to build simulations and start working with things and playing with variables. And so I do think that that is the latter end of the framework, being able to sketch things out and test them and really test your understanding of it and use that generative AI capability to improve your understanding and run experiments in a much more faster iterative way. Of course, the virtual world only takes us so far, but it gets better and better all the time. And as we're able to generate these experiences, you're going to be able to do that. So if you're going to get started on something, drop it into Notebook LM, start playing with it. I'd love to find out if this is something you're finding useful. I found it really useful, and that's why I wanted to cover it. And I think I'm going to keep making some deep dives, and maybe I'll put those on the front page of the website, and it'll become its own section. YouTube's got some things going on where they're really trying to go after podcasts. And who knows, maybe even the conversations I'm having here every week would be more interesting as just an audible conversation, where you can pick it up as a podcast and listen to it. I think that's part of the AI mistakes ethos, right? Like just go try it and see what happens. You're going to make some mistakes along the way, but we're all going to learn a whole lot from what happens. So with that said, I think I want to open it up to any other questions that you might have as we've been carrying on the discussion. I really appreciate all of you joining. I hope you're getting value out of this. And if you are, I would ask, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop your comments in the conversation. All of that stuff really matters to me. I'm at the very beginning of being able to do some really big things. I've got a 10-year plan for AI mistakes, and it's well beyond just having a YouTube channel or a broadcast that we can listen to. So, let me hear from you. And I think there's probably some opportunities for us to get together. Conversations are a really valuable part of doing a podcast. And I'm kind of trying to figure out what that might look like, because I think if it's just me, it's maybe not quite as interesting. So if you have a question that's out there, let me hear from you. Like, we got all kinds of ways to communicate with each other. I think that's a really valuable thing to do. And we're here to run experiments. Maybe you come across something that's interesting. I'm always reading about these new capabilities and trying to figure out, well, what is the thing that matters to me the most? Because sometimes the most popular things aren't the things that matter most to you. And I'm trying to balance that on the channel. So, really doing that is important. So let's cover some of these questions that I've got coming in here. So I'll just throw one up here on the screen. You said giving it too much information might be a problem earlier. My question is, how can a human do that? That's a really interesting question. We are always trying to summarize and contextualize information. I think that is really part of the human experience, right? You have a difficult conversation with someone and you come out of that room and somebody says, well, how did it go? And oftentimes that answer is based on not just the content of the conversation, but the emotion that's in the conversation. So honestly, I can't say that a human really is better at taking a whole host of content and consolidating it. I think that some of us are better than others. And I would say that you can definitely tell the difference between an expert and a novice in how easily they are able to contextualize a conversation around something that they know very well. And I can definitely say that I've been very impressed with the summarization capabilities from these large language models. During my day job, that's actually some of the features I get to talk most about. And I said earlier this week on X, Twitter, if you prefer, that summarization is actually the killer application of generative AI, because it can be extremely difficult to come up with a summary that is very succinct but captures the whole of the conversation. As it relates to NotebookLM, it is using summarization in having the conversation, but the conversation is not a direct derivation of that summarization. You understand the distinction? In other words, the purpose of creating an audio overview isn't to summarize the content, because you have to be able to zoom in and zoom out. And to do that effectively, it can't just be a summary, but you are going to get those insights that it's pulling out from the content to find those relevant details so that you're able to give context to the summary. So that's really valuable. I think that's where I would put that. Is it does better than the average human. Certainly you would need a real expert to do a better job at it. And obviously for the things that I'm dropping in here to test, I'm an expert in this space. So it did a good job, right? And if I'm not an expert in something, if I drop a new AI paper in here, something I have no familiarity with whatsoever, that's going to be really valuable, because it's going to take me from 0 to 70 or 80, and that's going to be helpful. I'm still going to have to focus to get that last bit. And I think that's where we kind of have to understand that you're not going to get everything out of these tools. AI gets you a lot further down the road, but it's not really a replacement. And that is the theme of the conversations that I'm having with folks every day. I see it all the time. I really do believe that simply a rip and replace of the human is an AI mistake. There are lots of ways that you can use these tools, but I just don't think that they're mature enough yet to be wholly trusted and totally set loose on their own. The whole AI agents things, there's a lot of talk in customer service where well, I can just get a large language model to do that and it'll be just as good. But I'm not convinced that we're there yet. I think that the technology needs a little bit more time to mature. And if you take the human out of the loop too quickly, people are going to distrust the technology because they're going to have a bad experience and there's not going to be a way to correct it. So that is something that we will have to continue to deal with. But that doesn't mean we can't get a lot of value out of this as individuals. And then, of course, Google also announced in that update that they released on October 17th. Let me put it back up on the screen. They are actually going to be doing Notebook LM business. So they're going to make this as a capability. So if you've got a day job, you've got a business, maybe you're trying to train your employees, this will be a feature that you'll be able to subscribe to and have it create the content for you. So there's definitely some business potential here, and Google's not going to miss out on that. I mean, I think of all of the tech companies, Google really has the most to lose with their search empire. That is going to be a real challenge for them. I've already said many times on the channel and in social media that I'm using Perplexity a lot. And Google has their AI generated answers in the search results, but that's just not enough for me. I need lots of sources and consolidation, and the extra work that Perplexity does in answering my questions is tremendously, tremendously valuable. And that's kind of the antithesis of this experience. You have to have the source documents. You have to know what you want to learn about for it to be valuable. Whereas most of the time, if I'm doing a search on Perplexity, it's something I don't have a clue about. And I just wanted to go pull the information for me. I wanted to figure out what it is that is important. And then I wanted to give me the answer quickly, rather than it being a 10-minute podcast that I have to listen to. So there are trade-offs to be made across the board. But I think the real experience here is understanding what's possible with the technology is really job zero, right? Understanding that this is a thing that you can do. Maybe this is something you can help a colleague out at work. Like they're trying to get a degree, or they're trying to solve a problem, and that they're always on the move, or maybe they don't have a computer at home. Maybe they just got their phone. And so again, download a PDF and load it into Notebook LM. That could be really valuable. I do think that this feature is worth a subscription fee. I got to be honest with you. I don't know if there is a cost for this. I'll have to follow up with that in the comments. I'm just not sure. It's included as a part of my subscription that I'm paying for Gemini anyway. So I'm not going to see any gates around being able to access the feature. It may not be available to everybody. I know you have to have a Google account, and pretty much everybody's got a Gmail address. So getting a login should be possible for everybody. But I think this is free. So if anybody knows, let me know. I'll go research it after we close out the conversation today. But really good opportunity for us to go and learn. So look, we're at the point now where you just got to go try the thing. Go pull up notebooklm.google.com and start playing with this. See what it's good for. I love that idea. Drop your user manual that, how many of us are putting things together and never reading the manual? Drop it in there. Maybe while you're trying to build that next furniture from IKEA, it can be trying to tell you how to put it together. So with that, I'll close out the conversation tonight. Go make some AI mistakes. And I hope you're enjoying the conversation. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Take care.